Ji-hoon Jung was a man marked by death. The scar carved across his face wasn't just a wound, it was a warning. Every woman who looked at him saw the same thing. A monster dressed in expensive suits, ruling Seoul's underworld from a throne built on fear. No one touched him, no one stayed. Until the night a Jamaican nurse with steady hands and fearless eyes reached for the one thing everyone else avoided: his face. Before we dive into Ji-hoon and Brianna's story, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love seeing this community grow from all corners of the world. Ji-hoon Jung was a man used to silence, not the peaceful kind. The heavy, suffocating silence that filled rooms when he entered them. The kind that made his men straighten their spines and lower their eyes. The kind that followed him through the marble halls of his empire like an invisible chain, reminding him that respect and fear were close cousins, but neither one was love. At 37, he had the kind of power most men would kill for. Underboss of South Korea's most ruthless mafia syndicate. Controller of territories that stretched from Busan to the DMZ. A man whose single phone call could end careers, collapse businesses, or make problems disappear into the Han River. But power didn't make him wanted. Not in the ways that mattered. The scar made sure of that. It ran from his right temple down across his cheekbone. Jagged and deliberate, carved not by accident but by intention. By betrayal. By the blade of a man he'd once called brother. The night it happened, Ji-hoon had been 29. Ambitious. Trusting. The coup attempt had failed. His brother hadn't. The scar healed. His ability to trust never did. He'd been handsome once. The kind of man who could walk into a room and have women lean closer without realizing it. Sharp jawline. Intense eyes. The confidence of someone born into power and raised to command it. The scar changed everything. First, the way people looked at him. Quick glances that skittered away like frightened birds. Then, the way he looked at himself. Every mirror became a reminder that he'd been foolish enough to believe in loyalty. Women hadn't stopped showing interest. Money had a way of attracting attention. But the warmth had vanished. Every smile was calculated. Every soft word transactional. Every "I love you" came with a price tag he could see from across the room. He learned quickly to read motives. And just as quickly to keep his own heart locked away. His penthouse overlooked the glittering sprawl of Seoul from the 63rd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, everything sharp angles and cold surfaces. Beautiful. Empty. Like him. Tonight was quieter than usual. No meetings. No interrogations. No blood on his hands that needed washing off. Just Ji-hoon, a glass of whiskey he wouldn't finish, and the city lights that reminded him he ruled a kingdom but lived in it alone. The whispers followed him everywhere. In the underground gambling dens. In the boardrooms of legitimate businesses he'd quietly acquired. In the halls of his own organization. The scarred king. The man who can't die but can't live. Cursed. He'd heard them all. Stopped caring about most of them. Except for one. No woman would ever want him. That one still had teeth. The call came at 9:47 p.m. "Boss, we have a situation." Min-jae took a knife to the ribs. "He's bleeding out." Ji-hoon's voice didn't change. "Hospital? Too many questions. We need someone who can come here. Discreet. Handle it." "We did. There's a trauma nurse on her way up now." Ji-hoon set down his glass. He didn't like surprises, especially not in his home. By the time the private elevator opened, he was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, expression neutral. He'd learned long ago that the best way to intimidate someone was to simply exist in their space without explanation. The doors slid open, and Brianna Campbell stepped into his world. She was stunning in a way that had nothing to do with trying. Warm, bronze skin that caught the ambient light. Natural hair pulled back into a neat, professional bun. High cheekbones, a graceful neck. She wore simple navy scrubs and carried a medical bag that looked like it had seen real work. But it wasn't her beauty that made him pause. It was her eyes, deep, alert, assessing the room with the calm efficiency of someone who'd walked into worse situations and walked back out alive. She looked at him, not past him, not around him, at him. No flinch, no sharp inhale, no telltale flicker of revulsion before the mask of professionalism slid into place. She just looked at him like he was a man. Nothing more, nothing less. "Mr. Jung?" Her voice was warm, steady, with the faint lilt of Jamaica underneath. "I'm Brianna Campbell. I'm here for your associate." Ji-hoon found himself speaking before he'd fully processed the moment. "He's in the east bedroom, third door on the left. Thank you." She moved past him with quiet confidence, her focus already shifting to the task at hand. He watched her disappear down the hallway, unsettled in a way he couldn't name. 40 minutes later, she emerged, stripping off bloodied gloves. "He'll live," she said simply. The wound was clean. Missed anything vital. He needs rest, antibiotics, and someone to check the stitches in 3 days. She paused. "And maybe better enemies." The corner of Ji-hoon's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Better enemies are hard to find. So are good trauma nurses who make house calls. She met his gaze evenly. "You're welcome, by the way. What do I owe you?" The agreed fee was already wired. "Your man handled it before I arrived." "Then what do you want?" She tilted her head slightly, studying him with the same calm assessment she'd used when she first arrived. "Want? Everyone wants something. Right now?" She glanced toward the window, at the city spread out like diamonds on black velvet. "I want to wash my hands and maybe sit down for 5 minutes before I head back into the cold." It was such a simple request. So human. So, without agenda. "Bathroom is through there," he said, gesturing. "Sit wherever you'd like." When she returned, she didn't sit. She walked to the window where he stood, maintaining a respectful distance but not retreating. "You have a beautiful view," she said softly. "It's just a city. It's your city, from what I understand. Does that bother you?" She considered the question seriously. Should it? Most people would say yes. "I'm not most people." She turned to face him fully. "I'm a trauma nurse, Mr. Jung. I've stitched up gang members, cops, teachers, CEOs. Everyone bleeds the same. Everyone feels pain the same. The rest is just context." He studied her face, searching for the lie, the angle, the hidden motive. Found nothing but honest curiosity. "Your scar," she said quietly. "Not a question, not an accusation, just an observation." He tensed, waited for the pity or the poorly hidden disgust. "Someone hurt you," she continued, her voice gentle but not fragile. "Hurt you badly. It was a long time ago, but you still carry it." "It's on my face," he said, his tone sharper than he intended. "Hard not to carry it. I don't mean the scar." She took a step closer, then another, until she was standing directly in front of him, close enough that he could catch the faint scent of cocoa butter and antiseptic. Her hand lifted slowly, giving him every opportunity to step back. He didn't. Her fingers touched his face, fingertips brushing the raised edges of the scar with a gentleness that made his chest constrict. Her thumb traced the line down to his jaw. "Someone hurt you," she whispered. "But I'm not here to hurt you." Ji-hoon forgot how to breathe. No one had touched his scar. Not voluntarily. Not with this kind of care. As though it were just another part of him. As though he were just a man. He should step back, should restore the distance, should remind her and himself that he wasn't someone who allowed this kind of vulnerability. But he couldn't move. "You should go," he said, his voice rough. "I should." She agreed. But her hand lingered for one more heartbeat before she lowered it. "Thank you for letting me help your friend." She gathered her bag and walked toward the elevator. Ji-hoon watched the doors close, her warm eyes the last thing he saw before the steel slid shut. The penthouse felt colder than it had in years, and for the first time since the night of the betrayal, since the blade carved his face and his ability to trust, Ji-hoon Jung felt something he'd thought was dead. He wanted to see her again. That single thought should have been easy to dismiss. Ji-hoon had built his empire on discipline, on the ability to separate want from need, emotion from strategy. But as he stood alone in his glass tower, the ghost of her touch still warming his scarred skin, he realized something had shifted. Brianna Campbell had walked into his world for 40 minutes and cracked something he'd spent 7 years fortifying. She hadn't flinched. She hadn't calculated. She'd just seen him. And that was more dangerous than any knife to the ribs. To understand why a single touch from a stranger could shake the foundation of a man who'd survived betrayal, assassination attempts, and his own descent into darkness, you'd need to understand the night that carved more than his face. The night that carved his soul. Ji-hoon told himself it meant nothing. 3 days had passed since Brianna Campbell walked out of his penthouse, and he'd replayed that moment, her fingers on his scar, her quiet words exactly 47 times. He knew because he'd counted, because counting gave him control. And control was the only thing that had kept him alive this long. But control didn't explain why he was standing outside Seoul Metropolitan Trauma Unit at 11:43 p.m., watching the staff entrance through the tinted windows of his Maybach. "Boss," Taemin said carefully from the driver's seat. His most trusted guard had been with him for 6 years, and knew better than most when to speak and when to stay silent. "We've been here for an hour." "I'm aware. Min-jae's checkup was scheduled for tomorrow. We could have called." I wanted to ensure the facility was adequate. The lie tasted bitter even as he said it. Taemin's reflection in the rearview mirror showed the smallest hint of a smile. Of course, boss. Ji-hoon had built his reputation on predictability. He didn't chase. He didn't wait. He certainly didn't sit outside hospitals like a lovesick teenager hoping for a glimpse of someone who'd probably forgotten him the moment the elevator doors closed. Yet here he was. The staff entrance opened. His spine straightened automatically. Brianna emerged, still in scrubs, a jacket thrown over her shoulders against Seoul's November chill. She was laughing at something a colleague said, a tall male nurse who stood too close for Ji-hoon's liking. The sound of her laughter carried across the parking lot, warm and genuine and completely unguarded. Something in his chest twisted. She'd been that unguarded with him. For 40 minutes, in his fortress of glass and steel, she'd treated him like he was just a person. Boss? Taemin's voice pulled him back. Should I? No. Ji-hoon opened the car door himself, stepping out before he could reconsider. The November air bit at his exposed skin as he crossed the parking lot. His long black coat billowed slightly behind him, and he watched the exact moment Brianna noticed him. Her laughter faded. Her colleague followed her gaze, stiffened visibly, and made a quick excuse before disappearing back inside. Everyone recognized Ji-hoon Jung. Even if they'd never seen his face, they knew the energy that preceded him, the weight of violence barely contained in expensive tailoring. Everyone except Brianna. She walked toward him with that same steady confidence, curiosity in her eyes but not fear. Mr. For Jung. Her voice held surprise but also something that sounded almost like pleasure. Is everything all right? Is your friend? Min-jae is fine. Healing well. He slid his hands into his pockets, a gesture that looked casual but was actually necessary to stop himself from reaching for her. I was in the area. Thought I'd confirm the medical standards here are acceptable. Her lips curved slightly. Were you now? Yes. At midnight. I keep unusual hours. I've noticed. She adjusted the bag on her shoulder, studying him with those intelligent eyes that saw too much. Would you like the official tour? Or should we skip to the part where you tell me why you're really here? His jaw tightened. She wasn't making this easy. Then again, nothing about Brianna Campbell had been easy from the moment they met. I wanted to see you again, he said, the truth surprising him as much as her. The admission hung between them in the cold air, visible almost as their breath. Oh. Her expression softened. That's unexpectedly honest. I don't have time for games. Neither do I. She shifted her weight, and he noticed the fatigue around her eyes. She'd been on her feet for hours. I just finished a 12-hour shift. I'm exhausted, starving, and my feet are screaming. But I'm glad you're here. You are? I've been thinking about you too. The words hit him harder than any blade. She said it so simply, as though admitting interest in the scarred king of Seoul's underworld was the most natural thing in the world. Let me take you home, he said. I have a car. I can see that. Her gaze flicked to the Maybach, then back to him with gentle amusement. It's very subtle. I don't do subtle. No, you really don't. She smiled, but then shook her head. Thank you, but I can take the subway. It's only 3 stops. At midnight, alone. I'm a grown woman, Mr. Jung. I've been taking care of myself for a long time. I'm aware, but Seoul can be, he caught himself. I'd feel better knowing you arrived safely. She studied him for a long moment, and he forced himself not to look away despite the exposure of having his motivations examined so closely. Just a ride home, she said finally. Nothing more. Nothing more, he agreed. Taemin had already opened the back door by the time they reached the car. If his guard was surprised to see Ji-hoon with a woman, something that happened approximately never, he was professional enough not to show it. The interior of the Maybach was warm, luxurious. Brianna settled into the leather seats with a soft sigh that made his throat tight. Where to? Taemin asked. Brianna provided an address in Itaewon, a diverse neighborhood, one of the few places in Seoul where her presence wouldn't draw constant stares. The drive was quiet at first. Ji-hoon wasn't used to comfortable silence. His world was filled with tense negotiations, barely veiled threats, the constant hum of violence waiting to be unleashed. But this sitting beside Brianna as Seoul's light streaked past the windows felt different, peaceful, dangerous. Can I ask you something? Her voice was soft, careful. You can ask. I may not answer. Fair enough. She turned slightly to face him, one leg tucked under her in a gesture so casual it made his carefully constructed walls ache. Why do you really check on your people personally? Most men in your position would delegate. You know what I am? Not a question. I'm not blind. Or naive. She didn't sound judgmental. just matter of fact. But that doesn't answer my question. He was silent for several blocks, watching the city he controlled pass by. Because I remember what it's like when no one comes. When you're bleeding and afraid and the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who put the knife in. Her hand moved not toward his scar this time, but to rest gently on his forearm. The touch was brief, grounding. That's a good reason. It's a practical reason. It's a human reason, she corrected. There's a difference. The car slowed to a stop outside a modest apartment building. Not wealthy, but well-maintained. The kind of place where people actually lived rather than just existed. This is me, Brianna said, but she didn't immediately move to leave. Thank you for the ride. And for whatever this is. Whatever this is, he repeated, tasting the uncertainty in the words. She smiled, reaching for the door handle. Good night, Mr. Jung. Ji-hoon. The correction came automatically. Just Ji-hoon. Her smile widened. Good night, Ji-hoon. He watched her enter the building, waited until he saw a light flicker on in a third-floor window. Only then did he lean back against the seat, releasing a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Back to the penthouse, boss? Taemin asked. Ji-hoon looked at his guard's questioning eyes in the rearview mirror, thought about the empty glass tower waiting for him, the cold spaces, the silence that had never bothered him before but now felt suffocating. No. He opened the door himself, stepping back out into the November night. I'll walk from here. Boss? Taemin's surprise was evident. It's 3 kilometers. I'm aware. Go home, Taemin. I'll see you tomorrow. But boss. Security protocols. Go home. Taemin hesitated, clearly torn between duty and the direct order. Finally, he nodded. Yes, boss. Be careful. Ji-hoon waited until the Maybach disappeared around the corner before he started walking, hands in his pockets, breath misting in the cold air, completely alone in a way he hadn't allowed himself to be in years. The streets of Seoul at midnight belonged to the desperate and the dangerous. He was both. But tonight, walking through the city he ruled from the shadows, he felt something else entirely. Vulnerable, hopeful, human. 3 kilometers gave him time to think. About the way Brianna's fingers had felt on his scar, about her laugh in the parking lot, about the fact that she'd thought about him, this scarred, violent man who lived in a world of darkness and hadn't run. Why can't I stay away from this woman? The question followed him through empty streets and past closed shops, past the underground gambling dens he owned, and the legitimate businesses that funneled money through his empire, past everything he'd built to prove he was worth something despite the scar. And by the time he reached his penthouse tower, standing at the base looking up at the glass monument to his isolation, he knew the answer. Because for the first time since that blade carved his face and destroyed his ability to trust, someone had touched him like he was worth touching. Someone had seen past the scar to the man underneath. And that was more dangerous than any enemy he'd ever faced. The injured soldier came into the trauma unit on a Tuesday, just after dawn. Brianna had been finishing her night shift, exhausted and ready to go home, when the doors burst open and 2 panicked civilians carried in a young man bleeding from his side. Gunshot, she assessed immediately, her professional mask sliding into place. Get me a trauma bay now. The next 40 minutes were a blur of blood, sterile instruments, and the delicate dance between life and death. The bullet had passed through cleanly lucky. The soldier was maybe 23, with terrified eyes and hands that wouldn't stop shaking even after the anesthesia. You're safe, Brianna told him as she sutured the wound. You're going to be fine. You don't understand, he whispered, his voice thick with pain and fear. I ran. I left. He'll kill me for leaving. Who will? Jung Dae-jung. The name came out like a curse. He's insane. Pure evil. I couldn't do what he asked. I couldn't. He broke off, tears streaming down his pale face. I just want to disappear. Brianna's hands never stopped moving. But something about the name triggered a memory. Jung. The same surname as Ji-hoon. Common enough in Korea, she told herself. Probably coincidence. Rest now, she said, finishing the last suture. You're safe here. But even as she said it, she wondered if it was true. 3 days later, Ji-hoon appeared at the hospital again. This time he didn't wait in the parking lot. He walked straight through the main entrance at 6 p.m., when Brianna's shift was ending, as though he owned the building. Heads turned. Whispers followed. Security stiffened but didn't approach. Everyone knew better than to question Ji-hoon Jung's presence anywhere in Seoul. Brianna saw him before he saw her. He stood by the information desk, perfectly still in another expensive dark suit, scanning the lobby with the patient intensity of a predator. Looking for her, her heart did something complicated in her chest. You're going to give someone a heart attack if you keep appearing like that, she said, approaching from his left. He turned, and the tension in his shoulders eased almost imperceptibly. You said you finish at 6. I did, 3 days ago. You remember. I remember everything you say. The admission was too honest, too revealing, but he didn't seem to regret it. People were staring. Brianna could feel the weight of their curiosity, their speculation. The scarred man and the foreign nurse. Tomorrow there would be whispers. Walk with me? She asked. He nodded. They left through the staff exit safer, more private, and fell into step beside each other. The early November evening was cool but not yet bitter. The sun setting behind Seoul's mountains in shades of orange and gold. There's a cafe nearby, Brianna said. Quiet. They make excellent coffee. I don't drink coffee. Tea then. Or just sit with me for a while. Something in his expression softened. I can do that. The cafe was small, tucked between a bookshop and a flower stand. The kind of place that tourists never found but locals treasured. Brianna ordered a flat white. Ji-hoon ordered green tea and paid before she could protest. They found a corner table, away from the few other patrons. You've been coming to the hospital a lot, Brianna said, wrapping her hands around her cup. You've been noticing. Hard not to. You're not exactly subtle, remember? His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. I wanted to see you again. Multiple times, apparently. Why? The question hung between them, simple but weighted with everything unspoken. Ji-hoon stared into his tea for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost hesitant. Because you touched my scar. And you didn't look at me like I was broken. Brianna's chest tightened. You're not broken. Most people would disagree. Most people are wrong. She leaned forward slightly. Can I tell you something? Please. I almost didn't come to Seoul. The words came easier than she expected. I was engaged back home in Jamaica. Man named Marcus. Successful, charming, all the right things on paper. I thought I loved him. Thought we were building something real. Ji-hoon's eyes sharpened with attention, but he said nothing, letting her speak. Turns out he was building something real, a career on my back. He used my credentials, my connections in the medical field, my reputation. When I found out, when I confronted him, he told me I should be grateful, that no one else would want a woman too ambitious, too independent, too much. He was a fool, maybe, but he wasn't wrong about one thing. I am too much for people sometimes, too direct, too stubborn. I don't fit easily into the boxes people want to put me in. She smiled, but it held old pain. Coming to Seoul was supposed to be a fresh start. Be anonymous, just do the work I love without all the complications. And then you met me. His voice held something like regret. And then I met you, she agreed. But here's the thing, Ji-hoon. You don't look at me like I'm too much. You don't look at me like I'm a foreigner who doesn't belong. You just look at me, see me. And that's rarer than you think. His hand moved across the table slowly, deliberately. Palm up. An offering. Brianna placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and careful, as though she were something precious that might break. I'm afraid of this, he said quietly. Of you. Why? Because people who get close to me? He stopped, jaw working. Bad things happen to people who get close to me. The scar isn't just a mark. It's a warning. I'm dangerous, Brianna. The world I live in is dangerous. I'm a trauma nurse in one of the busiest hospitals in Seoul. I'm familiar with danger. Not like this. Then help me understand. She squeezed his hand gently. Tell me what happened. Tell me about the scar. For several heartbeats, she thought he wouldn't answer. His walls were back up, that familiar cold mask sliding into place. But then he spoke. I had a brother. Not by blood, but by choice. Dae-jung. We grew up in the organization together. Trusted each other completely, I thought. His voice roughened. I thought he was the one person in the world who saw past the game, past the power, who actually gave a damn about me. What happened? He tried to kill me. The words were flat, emotionless. Practiced. 7 years ago, there was a coup attempt. He wanted control of the southern territories. Thought I was too soft, too sentimental. Waited until I was alone, vulnerable. He carved this, Ji-hoon gestured to his scar, into my face as a message. That I was marked, cursed, that anyone who followed me would end up dead. Brianna's throat went tight with fury and sorrow. But you survived. I survived. He didn't. She understood what he wasn't saying. That Ji-hoon had killed his closest friend. That the scar wasn't just a physical wound but the death of his ability to trust. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Don't pity me. I'm not. She stood, moving around the small table to sit beside him instead of across from him, close enough that their shoulders touched. I'm angry for you. Angry that someone you loved hurt you that way. Angry that you've had to carry this alone. His eyes met hers, vulnerable in a way she suspected few people ever saw. I'm terrified of people touching my scar, he admitted. Terrified of what it means, of what they see when they look at it. Brianna lifted her hand slowly, giving him every chance to pull away. When he didn't, she cupped his scarred cheek, thumb tracing the line she'd touched that first night. Someone hurt you, she said softly. But I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because I see you, Ji-hoon. Not the king, not the monster, just you. And you're worth seeing. His eyes closed, his breath shuddered, and for the first time since they'd met, Ji-hoon Jung let himself lean into her touch. They sat like that for a long time, her hand on his face, his heart cracking open despite every defense he'd built while the cafe hummed quietly around them and Seoul darkened outside the windows. Finally, he spoke. Come to dinner. Let me cook for you. She pulled back slightly, surprised. You cook? I do many things people don't expect. When? Tomorrow. My place. It was a risk. His penthouse was his sanctuary, his fortress. He never brought anyone there who wasn't business or bleeding. But Brianna just smiled. I'd like that. The photographs hit the underground networks on a Thursday morning, not the legitimate news sites or gossip blogs those Ji-hoon controlled through money and fear, but the dark web forums where Seoul's criminal world exchanged information. Territory disputes were negotiated, and reputations were destroyed. Someone had been watching. The images were grainy but unmistakable. Ji-hoon and Brianna at the cafe, his hand reaching for hers across the table, her touching his scar with a tenderness that made him look human, vulnerable, weak. By noon, the rumors had spread through every syndicate, gang, and criminal enterprise in Seoul like poison in the water supply. The scarred king has found a pet. Foreign nurse warming his bed for the right price. Ji-hoon Jung going soft over some Jamaican woman. Choi Min-so, underboss of a rival faction that had been quietly building power in Gangnam, saw the photos and smiled. He'd been looking for an opening for months, some crack in Ji-hoon's armor, some weakness to exploit. Now he'd found it. Get me everything on the woman, he told his intelligence officer. Where she lives, where she works, everyone she cares about. I want leverage. Yes, sir. What's the play? Min-seo studied the image of Ji-hoon's scarred face tilted toward the camera, eyes closed, the nurse's hand gentle against his cheek. We remind Ji-hoon Jung that men like him don't get love stories. They get tragedies. The rumor reached Brianna's hospital by early afternoon. She was checking vitals on a post-op patient when she noticed the whispers. 2 nurses at the station, heads bent together, glancing in her direction. The resident who usually joked with her, suddenly finding excuses to be elsewhere. At first, she dismissed it. She was used to being different, being discussed. The foreign nurse was always going to be a topic of conversation in a hospital where she was one of the only black faces. But this felt different. Nurse Campbell? The head nurse, Mrs. Park, appeared at her elbow. Her expression was professionally neutral, but her eyes held something like concern. May I speak with you? Privately? They stepped into an empty consultation room. There are rumors, Mrs. Park said without preamble, about you and someone dangerous. Brianna's stomach tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't insult my intelligence. Ji-hoon Jung has been seen here multiple times. You left with him. There are people saying, she stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. They're saying unkind things, Nurse Campbell, about why a man like him would be interested in you. The implication hit like a physical blow. They think I'm with him for money, or that he's paying you for companionship. Mrs. Park's expression softened. I don't believe it, but I wanted you to hear it from me before it spreads further. Brianna's voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. I'm sorry. I know it's not fair. But these people, this world, it's dangerous to be connected to it. Maybe you should consider distance. Distance. As if what she felt could be managed through careful separation. Brianna finished her shift on autopilot. Professional, efficient, pretending she didn't notice the stares, the whispered conversations that stopped when she approached. Ji-hoon called her 3 times that day. She didn't answer. The rumor reached Ji-hoon's organization by evening. He was in a meeting with his finance officers when Taemin appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully blank, which meant something was very wrong. Boss, we have a situation. Ji-hoon dismissed the room with a gesture. When they were alone, Taemin placed a phone on the desk. The screen showed the cafe photos, along with dozens of forum posts. Ji-hoon read them all without expression. She's just another gold digger. Think she actually likes that scarred face? Please. How much do you think she's charging per night? The scarred king, finally desperate enough to pay for affection. Each word was a blade finding the exact scars Dae-jung had left behind. Not the physical one. The deeper ones. The ones that whispered he was unlovable, unwanted, only valuable for his power and his money. Who leaked this? His voice was ice. We're tracking the source, but boss, there's more. Minseo's faction is involved. They're using this to prove I'm weak. Ji-hoon finished. To suggest that caring about someone makes me vulnerable. Does it? The question hung in the air. Honest. Brutal. Yes, Ji-hoon said quietly. It does. He tried calling Brianna. Her phone went straight to voicemail. He sent a car to her apartment. His driver reported she wasn't home. By midnight, Ji-hoon stood in his penthouse, staring at the city lights, and felt the familiar cold seeping back into his chest. The same cold that had protected him for 7 years. The same cold that had kept him alive. No woman has ever wanted you without a motive. Dae-jung's voice, eternal and poisonous, echoing in his mind. Look at you, thinking someone could love that face. Love what you've become. Ji-hoon's hand moved to his scar, tracing the line with fingers that had Brianna's touch still imprinted in their memory. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe this, whatever this was with Brianna, was just another transaction. Another woman smart enough to see the value in pretending to care. Eventually, the mask would slip. Eventually, she'd want something. Ask for something. Prove that the rumor spreaders were right all along. Better to end it now. Better to retreat into the cold before the warmth destroyed him. His phone buzzed. A text from Taemin. Choi Min-so's men spotted outside her hospital. Orders? Ji-hoon stared at the message for a long time. He could send protection, could surround her with guards and armor and all the weapons his empire could provide. Or he could do what he'd always done when things got complicated. Walk away, let the cold back in, survive alone. His fingers hovered over the screen. But instead of responding, he set the phone down and walked to the window. The city sprawled below him, glittering and indifferent. He'd built this empire to prove he was worth something despite the scar. But what was it worth if he was still just as alone? Brianna sat in her apartment that night, lights off, staring at her phone. 3 missed calls from Ji-hoon. 2 text messages. We need to talk. And later, are you safe? She should respond. Should tell him she was fine, just processing. Should explain that the rumors hurt not because she believed them, but because they revealed how the world would always see them, the scarred mafia boss and the woman who must have an agenda. But another part of her, the part that had survived Marcus's betrayal, that had rebuilt herself in a foreign country, that had learned to guard her own heart, whispered something else. If he believes the rumors, if he retreats without fighting for this, then maybe everyone was right. Maybe he didn't want love. Maybe he just wanted someone brave enough to touch his scar so he could pretend, for a little while, that he was worth touching. She set her phone face down on the coffee table. If he wants me in his life, she said aloud to her empty apartment, he'll come back. He'll fight for this. And if he didn't, then she'd have her answer. The city outside her window hummed with its usual nighttime symphony. Somewhere across Seoul, in a glass tower she could probably see if she looked hard enough, a man stood alone with his demons. And between them, the distance grew. My mom said nobody wants to watch a mafia boss find love. Let's prove her wrong. Subscribe. Share this with someone who loves a good romance. And comment love if you're Team Ji-hoon and Brianna. 3 days of silence felt like 3 years. Ji-hoon functioned on autopilot. Meetings happened. Decisions were made. His empire continued operating with its usual ruthless efficiency, but none of it registered. He was back inside the shell he'd built after Dae-jung's betrayal, cold, calculated, unreachable, safe, empty. You're going to wear a hole in that floor, Taemin observed on the 3rd night, watching Ji-hoon pace his penthouse office. Then I'll replace it, or you could call her. She's made her position clear. Ji-hoon's voice was flat. She hasn't returned my calls. The message is received. Is it? Taemin moved to stand in his boss's path, forcing him to stop. Or are you doing what you always do, assuming the worst because it's easier than hoping for the best? Ji-hoon's expression went dangerous. Careful. I've been with you for 6 years, boss. I've seen you face down rival syndicates, survive assassination attempts, build an empire out of blood and fear. But I've never seen you terrified until now. I'm not. You're terrified, Taemin interrupted something he'd normally never dare. Because for the first time since the scar, someone looked at you like you were just a man. And now you're convinced she's going to realize what everyone else thinks, that you're not worth the risk. The words hit like bullets, each one finding its mark. She should stay away, Ji-hoon said. But his voice lacked conviction. The rumors. Min-seo's people watching her, it's not safe. I'm not safe. Did you ask her what she wants? Or did you just decide for her? Ji-hoon didn't answer. Taemin sighed. The Brianna Campbell who walked into your penthouse and touched your scar without flinching doesn't strike me as someone who needs you to make decisions for her. Maybe she's waiting to see if you're brave enough to fight for something that isn't territory or power. Long after Taemin left, those words echoed in the silence. Brave enough. Ji-hoon had faced death 100 times without blinking. But standing on Brianna's doorstep, raising his hand to knock, feeling his heart thunder against his ribs, this was a different kind of courage. This was the courage to be seen, to be vulnerable, to risk the worst pain he could imagine. Confirmation that he truly was unlovable. He knocked before he could retreat. Footsteps. A pause. The security viewer darkening as she checked. Then nothing. For several heartbeats, he thought she wouldn't open the door. Thought this was his answer. Silence. Rejection. The cold seeping back in, to fill the space she'd briefly warmed. The door opened. Brianna stood there in soft clothes, worn jeans, a loose sweater. Her hair was down, natural curls framing her face. She looked exhausted, beautiful, guarded. Ji-hoon. His name in her voice still did something to him, still reached past the armor. Can I come in? She hesitated, and that hesitation hurt more than any blade. But finally, she stepped back, opening the door wider. Her apartment was small but carefully made into a home. Warm colors, plants thriving in corners, photographs on the walls, everything his penthouse wasn't. They stood in her living room, 3 feet of space between them that might as well have been an ocean. I heard the rumors, she said quietly. I know. And you disappeared. I thought. He stopped, forced himself to meet her eyes. I thought you deserved better than to be dragged into my world, than to have your reputation destroyed because of me. That's very noble. Her voice held an edge. But you didn't ask me what I wanted. What do you want? I want to know if you believe them. She crossed her arms, a gesture of self-protection that made his chest ache. The rumors. Do you think I'm with you for money? For status? For whatever other horrible things people are saying? No. The answer came without hesitation. Then why did you pull away? This was it. The moment he could retreat, could hide behind convenient lies and protective anger. Or he could do the thing that terrified him most, tell the truth. Because I'm afraid, he said, voice rough. Because every woman who's shown interest in me since the scar has wanted something. Power. Money. Connection to my organization. And I learned to live with that. Learned to expect it. But you... He took a step closer, then another. You touched my scar like it was nothing. Like I was just a man. And I don't know how to... His voice broke. 7 years of iron control. 7 years of never showing weakness. And he broke in Brianna Campbell's small living room at 11:47 p.m. on a Friday night. I don't know how to believe someone could want me without conditions, he finished quietly. I withdrew because I was terrified of the moment you'd reveal what you really wanted. Because losing you after hoping. He swallowed hard. That would destroy me in ways Dae-jung's blade never could. Silence. Then Brianna closed the distance between them. Her hands rose to cup his face, thumbs brushing over his scar with that same impossible gentleness. You foolish man, she whispered. I'm not here for your money. I make my own. I'm not here for your power, I have my own. I'm here because when I look at you, I see someone who's survived everything the world threw at him and still has the capacity to care, still shows up personally when his people are hurt, still stands outside hospitals hoping to see someone who made him feel human again. Brianna, I'm here, she continued, her voice fierce now, because I know what it's like to be used, to have someone look at you and see only what you can provide. Marcus taught me that lesson well, so when I tell you I see you, Ji-hoon, I mean I see you, not the boss, not the reputation, not the scar, just the man underneath who's been alone for far too long. A sound escaped him, half laugh, half sob, an entirely undone sound he'd never made in his adult life. I don't deserve you. That's not your decision to make. She pulled him closer, until his forehead rested against hers. I get to decide what I deserve, and I've decided I deserve someone who sees me the same way I see him, someone real, someone brave enough to admit when they're afraid. I'm terrified, he admitted. Every day. That this isn't real. That you'll wake up and realize. Stop. Her thumbs traced his cheekbones. Stop deciding my feelings for me. I'm a grown woman. I knew what I was walking into when I touched your scar that first night. I knew you were dangerous. Knew your world was complicated. And I chose it anyway. I choose you anyway. Why? Because you're worth choosing. Something in Ji-hoon shattered completely. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, burying his face in the curve of her neck. She held him just as tightly, one hand stroking his hair while he trembled against her. I'm here, she murmured. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere. They stood like that for a long time, Ji-hoon finally letting someone hold him while 7 years of loneliness drained out in shaking breaths. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were red but clear. The rumors will get worse. Min Seo's faction will try to use you against me. Your life will get complicated. My life is already complicated. I'm a black Jamaican woman working in Seoul. Complicated is my normal. I can't promise I'll always get this right. I'm not good at, he gestured vaguely. This, emotions, vulnerability. Good thing I'm patient. The smallest smile touched his mouth. You'll have to be very patient. I'm a trauma nurse. Patience is literally my job. He cupped her face the way she'd cupped his, mirroring her gentleness. I want to try. Want to be the man you seem to think I can be. You already are that man. You just need to believe it. She led him to her couch, settled him down, then sat beside him with her shoulder pressed against his. The exhaustion of 3 sleepless nights crashed over him suddenly. His head dropped to her shoulder, then, following an instinct he'd long suppressed, to her lap. Brianna's fingers moved through his hair, gentle and rhythmic. Sleep, she said softly. I've got you. And for the first time in 7 years, Ji-hoon Jong let himself be vulnerable enough to close his eyes, let himself trust that when he woke, she'd still be there. Let himself believe, just for a moment, that maybe he was allowed this. Within minutes, his breathing evened out into the deep rhythm of genuine sleep. Not the light, always alert sleep of a man who expects betrayal, but real rest. Brianna sat very still, her hand continuing its gentle motion through his hair, and felt tears prick her own eyes. This man, this scarred, dangerous, impossibly complicated man, had given her something precious. His broken pieces, trusting her to handle them with care. And she would. She absolutely would. Outside, Seoul continued its endless rhythm, but in her small apartment, in this moment of hard-won peace, 2 people who'd learned to survive alone figured out what it meant to not be alone anymore. Ji-hoon woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. For a disorienting moment, he didn't remember where he was. The soft cushions beneath him weren't his expensive mattress. The gentle sounds from another room weren't his penthouse's silence. Then memory flooded back the confession. The tears, Brianna's hands in his hair, and something warm settled in his chest. He sat up slowly, his body protesting the awkward sleeping position. Through the open doorway, he could see Brianna in her small kitchen, still in her comfortable clothes, humming something soft while she moved around. Domestic, normal, everything his life had never been. Coffee? She called without turning around. Or are you still a tea purist? How did you know I was awake? I'm a nurse. I notice breathing patterns. She turned, offering him a mug. You look better. Actually rested. He took the tea, their fingers brushing in the exchange. I haven't slept like that in years. Then you should do it more often. On your couch? If that's what it takes. She settled beside him, her own coffee cradled in both hands. Though I imagine your penthouse has significantly more comfortable sleeping arrangements. More comfortable, less peaceful. He studied her face in the morning light. You didn't have to let me stay. I wanted to. Those 3 words, simple, honest, still felt like miracles to him. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking their respective beverages, the morning light gentle through her windows. You told me about your scar, Brianna said eventually. About Daejung trying to kill you, but you didn't tell me everything. Ji-hoon tensed automatically. You don't have to, she continued quickly. Not if you're not ready. But I want you to know I'm here for all of it. The whole story. Not just the parts that are easy to share. He stared into his tea, watching the leaves swirl. Outside, Seoul was waking up, traffic increasing, voices rising, the city grinding back to life. We were 12 when we met, he said finally. Both of us brought into the organization young. Too young. Daejung's father was a lieutenant. Mine was an enforcer who died in a territory war when I was 8. The syndicate took me in because that's what they did. You took care of your own. Brianna listened without interruption, her presence steady. Daejung and I were inseparable, brothers in every way that mattered. We learned together, fought together, rose through the ranks together. I trusted him more than anyone, more than my own reflection. His hand moved unconsciously to his scar. When we were both 29, there was a vote coming up, leadership of the Southern Territories, most of Seoul, parts of Busan. I was the likely choice. I'd proven myself, had the respect of the older bosses. But Daejung wanted it more than I did. I just didn't know how much more. That's when he tried to kill you. He invited me to his apartment, said he wanted to celebrate my likely promotion. We drank, talked about the future, about how we'd run things together, him as my second, like always. Ji-hoon's voice went flat, distant. I didn't see the knife until it was already cutting into my face. Brianna's hand found his, squeezing gently. He told me while he carved that I was weak, sentimental, that the organization needed someone harder, that my face would mark me as cursed, no one would follow a scarred king. Ji-hoon's throat worked. He was going to kill me after, make it look like a rival faction. But I fought back, barely. We both knew that night that only one of us would leave his apartment alive. And you survived. I survived. The words tasted like ash. I took his knife and He stopped, couldn't continue. Brianna shifted closer, wrapping both arms around him. He gave you no choice. I still see his face sometimes. Not when he was attacking me, but before, when we were kids, when he was my brother. That's the hardest part of betrayal, she said softly. It doesn't just kill the present, it poisons all the good memories too. Yes, he turned to look at her. How do you know? Marcus. Her expression went distant. After I found out he'd been using me, every good memory became suspect. Every I love you became a calculation. Every moment of happiness was just me being fooled. She met his eyes. It takes time to separate who someone really was from who you needed them to be. And does time help? Eventually. But having someone who sees you clearly helps more. They sat like that, wrapped in shared understanding, until Ji-hoon's phone shattered the peace with an urgent buzz. Tae-min, which meant serious business. I have to take this, he said apologetically. Of course. He stepped into her small bedroom for privacy. What is it? Boss, we have a problem. The soldier from last week, the one who ran from Daejung's faction. Daejung's been dead for 7 years. His younger brother hasn't. Jung Dae-hyun took over the remnants. He's been operating quietly, rebuilding. And the soldier Nurse Campbell treated? He gave up information. About you. About her. Ice flooded Ji-hoon's veins. Where is she vulnerable? Everywhere, boss. Dae-hyun knows her address, her schedule, her routes. He's been watching her for days. Why wasn't I informed? We just confirmed the connection. Boss, there's more. Choi Min-seo's faction has been sharing intelligence with Dae-hyun. They're coordinating. Of course they were. His enemies circling like sharks who'd scented blood. Double security at the hospital. Get eyes on her apartment building. And send. A crash from the living room cut him off. Ji-hoon's instincts screamed. He ended the call and moved, fast and silent, back to the doorway. Brianna's front door hung open, splintered at the lock. Her coffee mug lay shattered on the floor, and she was gone. On her small dining table, weighted down by her keys, a note. She's alive. For now. Come alone to the Songdo warehouse district if you want her to stay that way. Midnight. No weapons. No backup. Just you. It's time to finish what my brother started. Dae-hyun. Ji-hoon stared at the note. Every muscle in his body locked. They'd taken her. While he was here, while he'd let his guard down for 3 seconds, they'd taken the one person who'd made him believe he was allowed to be human. His phone was already dialing. Tae-min, they have her. Boss, we're tracking. We'll mobilize. No. His voice was steel. They want me alone. I'm going alone. That's a death trap. I know. He looked around Brianna's apartment, the plants, the photos, the warmth she'd built, the space where, just minutes ago, he'd been learning what peace felt like. Doesn't matter. Get me weapons. Light. Concealable. And a car. Boss, if I'm not back by dawn, you know what to do. He ended the call before Tae-min could protest further. Outside Brianna's window, Seoul sprawled innocent and oblivious. Somewhere in that maze of buildings and streets, enemies who'd waited 7 years for revenge had the woman who'd touched his scar and called him brave. Ji-hoon's hand moved to the mark on his face, feeling the raised edges Daejung had carved with deliberate cruelty. Your face will mark you as cursed. Maybe his brother had been right. Maybe everyone he tried to care for was destined to suffer because of his proximity. Or maybe, just maybe, he could save her, even if it cost him everything. The Songdo warehouse district was a graveyard of failed businesses and abandoned dreams. Rusted shipping containers stacked like children's blocks. Gutted buildings with broken windows. The smell of salt water from the nearby harbor mixing with decay. Perfect place for violence. Ji-hoon arrived at 11:45 p.m. alone, as instructed. Wearing dark clothes, 2 small knives hidden against his spine, not exactly unarmed, but the least weaponry he'd carried into a fight since he was 17. The warehouse Dae-hyun had specified loomed ahead, illuminated by a single flickering light. "I'm here," he called out, voice echoing. "Let her go." Laughter from the shadows. Then Dae-hyun emerged, younger than Ji-hoon by 5 years, with the same sharp features as his dead brother but meaner around the eyes. The scarred king finally learned humility. Behind Dae-hyun, 4 men dragged Brianna forward. She was bound to a chair, tape across her mouth, but her eyes blazed with fury rather than fear. She'd been fighting, her scrubs were torn, and one of her captors sported a fresh black eye. "That's my woman," Ji-hoon thought with fierce pride despite the terror. "Let her go," he repeated. "This is between us." "No." Dae-hyun circled closer. "This is about what you took from me. You killed my brother, the only family I had. And you took his territory, his reputation, his legacy. You scarred him in more ways than he scarred you. He tried to kill me first. He was right to. You were weak then. You're weak now." Dae-hyun gestured to Brianna, caring about a nurse, a foreign woman. "Have you forgotten what we are? We don't get love stories. We get survival stories. Maybe I'm tired of just surviving. Then you'll die soft." Dae-hyun pulled a knife, the same style his brother had used. "I'm going to carve her face the way Dae-jung carved yours. Then I'm going to kill you. And the last thing you'll see is her blood on my hands." Ji-hoon's world narrowed to one simple truth. He would not let that happen. "I'll make you a deal," he said, keeping his voice calm. "Let her go unharmed, and I'll give you what you want, a fair fight, just you and me. No weapons, hand to hand. You win, you take everything, my territories, my reputation, my life. And if you win, she walks out of here untouched. And you disappear, leave Seoul. I'll even let you live." Dae-hyun studied him, suspicion and interest warring. "Why would the scarred king fight fair?" "Because I'm choosing who I want to be." Ji-hoon met Brianna's eyes across the distance. Even bound and gagged, she was trying to shake her head, trying to tell him not to do this. Not the monster everyone made me, the man she believes I can be. For a long moment, the warehouse held its breath. Then Dae-hyun smiled. "Cut her loose. This I want to see." His men hesitated, but obeyed. Brianna ripped the tape from her mouth the moment her hands were free. "Ji-hoon, don't. Get behind the containers," he told her. "No matter what happens, stay hidden." "I'm not leaving you, Brianna." He looked at her fully, letting her see everything he felt. "Please. I can't fight if I'm worried about you. Hide. Trust me." She understood what he wasn't saying. If this goes wrong, run. One of Dae-hyun's men shoved her toward the stacked containers. She stumbled but caught herself, shooting Ji-hoon. One last look, fierce and terrified and believing before disappearing into the shadows. "Touching," Dae-hyun said. Then he lunged. The fight was brutal from the first exchange. Dae-hyun was younger, faster, hungry for revenge. But Ji-hoon had something his opponent lacked. A reason to survive beyond hatred. They crashed through the warehouse, fists connecting with flesh, bodies slamming into concrete. Ji-hoon's training kept him defensive at first, blocking, evading, wearing Dae-hyun down. But defense wasn't enough. Dae-hyun landed a vicious hook to Ji-hoon's ribs. Another to his jaw. Ji-hoon tasted blood, felt his vision blur. "You're nothing without your guns and your men," Dae-hyun screamed. "Just a scarred monster pretending to be human." Ji-hoon grabbed him mid-charge, using Dae-hyun's momentum to throw him into a support beam. The crack of impact echoed. Dae-hyun went down hard. Ji-hoon could have ended it there. Should have ended it. His body screamed to finish this threat permanently. But he hesitated. Because somewhere behind the containers, Brianna was watching. The woman who'd touched his scar and called him brave. Who'd told him he got to choose who he wanted to be. Dae-hyun saw the hesitation. Saw it and exploited it. He grabbed a piece of rebar from the rubble and swung. The metal caught Ji-hoon across the temple. Stars exploded. He went down, blood pouring into his eyes, not from his scar this time, but from a new wound. Dae-hyun stood over him. Rebar raised for a killing blow. "Any last words, scarred king?" "Yes. Brianna's voice rang out clear. Duck. Jihoon dropped flat. A shipping pallet swung through the space his head had occupied, wielded by Brianna with all her strength. It connected with Daehyun's skull with a sickening thud. He dropped like a stone. For several heartbeats, silence. Then Brianna was beside Jihoon, her hands on his face, checking his pupils, assessing the head wound with professional efficiency even as tears streamed down her cheeks. You absolute fool, she choked out. You ridiculous, brave fool. You were supposed to hide. I'm a trauma nurse, not a coward. She helped him sit up, tearing fabric from her scrubs to press against his head wound. And you were about to die. Daehyun groaned, starting to stir. Jihoon reached for one of his hidden knives. It would be so easy, so justified. This man had kidnapped Brianna, tried to kill him, wanted to carve her face. Brianna's hand covered his, stopping him. You're not the monster they want you to be, she said softly. Remember? Their eyes met. In hers he saw it clearly. The choice. The crossroads. Kill Daehyun and prove that violence was all he'd ever be. Or let him live and prove that maybe, just maybe, he could break the cycle. Jihoon's hand opened. The knife clattered to the concrete. Call the police, he said. Anonymous tip. Let the system handle him. Brianna's smile, exhausted, proud, beautiful, made the choice worth it. By the time Daehyun's men recovered enough to react, Jihoon and Brianna were already gone. By the time police arrived at the warehouse, they found only an unconscious would-be kingpin and enough evidence to put him away for years. And somewhere across the harbor, in the back of Taemin's car, Jihoon sat with Brianna tucked against his side, his head bandaged, his body aching, but whole. You came for me, she said softly. Always will, even though I ignored your calls for 3 days? Even then, he tilted her face up, careful of his injuries. I'm sorry I pulled away. Sorry I let fear make my choices. You came back. That's what matters. I'll keep coming back. He pressed his forehead to hers gently, because of the head wound, but firmly enough to mean it. For as long as you'll have me, that might be a very long time. Good. They sat in silence as Seoul blurred past the windows, two people who'd survived separate hells finding unexpected grace in each other's arms. And for the first time in 7 years, Jihoon Jung felt something beyond survival. He felt alive. The penthouse rooftop had been off-limits for years. Jihoon rarely came up here. It was too exposed, too open, too reminiscent of the vulnerability he'd spent most of his adult life avoiding. But tonight, 3 days after the warehouse, his body still decorated with fading bruises, he found himself drawn to the edge. Below, Seoul glittered, endless lights, endless lives intersecting in ways both beautiful and brutal. The rooftop door opened quietly. He didn't turn. He knew her footsteps by now, steady, purposeful, carrying the weight of someone who walked toward things rather than away from them. Your security team almost didn't let me up, Brianna said, coming to stand beside him at the railing. Apparently rooftops are high-risk locations. They are, but you're here anyway. Needed air. Needed. He stopped, not sure how to finish. Needed to feel something besides walls? She offered gently. Something like that. They stood in comfortable silence for a while. The night air was cold, winter truly settling into the city now. Brianna wore one of his jackets he'd insisted when she arrived, and the sight of her wrapped in something of his did complicated things to his chest. How's your head? She asked, her fingers ghosting near the bandage that still covered his temple. Healing. You did good work. I've had practice. She paused. The police arrested 6 of Daehyun's top people. The investigation is exposing connections to other crimes. He'll be locked up for decades, minimum. Good. And Choi Min-seo's faction is scrambling. Turns out when you let someone live and call the police instead of starting a war, it makes you look stronger, not weaker. Your reputation. I don't care about my reputation. He turned to face her fully. Not anymore. Or rather, I care about what one person thinks of it more than what the whole city thinks. Jihoon, I need to say something. He took a breath, and for once didn't try to control the tremor in it. What happened at the warehouse, what you did. I hit a man with a pallet. Not exactly heroic. You saved my life. You came for me first. You walked into a death trap alone because you couldn't bear the thought of me being hurt. She moved closer, until they were nearly touching. I'd say we're even. We're not, though. His hands rose to frame her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones the way hers had brushed his scar. For 7 years I've believed I was cursed, that the scar marked me as someone who doesn't get to have this. Have someone. Have love. Her breath caught. Every relationship before was transactional. Every touch calculated. I learned to live with that. Learned to accept that maybe that's all I deserved. His voice roughened, and then you walked into my penthouse, looked me in the eye, and touched the thing I hated most about myself like it was nothing. Like I was worth touching despite it. Because you are… Let me finish, he said gently. Please, I need to say this before I lose my nerve. She nodded, her eyes already bright with unshed tears. I thought you'd eventually see what everyone else saw. The monster, the scar, the curse. I waited for you to ask for money, or favors, or something that would prove this was just another transaction. His thumbs continued their gentle motion. But you never did. You just kept seeing me, kept touching me without fear, kept believing I was someone worth believing in. You are, and I'm terrified, he admitted, the words breaking free at last. I'm terrified because I love you, Brianna. And love is the one thing I swore I'd never let myself feel again. The tears spilled over now, tracking down her cheeks. I love you, he repeated, tasting the words, finding them less frightening the second time. And I don't know how to do this. Don't know how to be someone's whatever this is. But I want to try. Want to be the man you keep insisting I can be. Even though I have no idea if I actually can. Ji-hoon, I love you, he said a third time. Because apparently 7 years of locked-away emotion needed repetition to fully release. And I need you to know that, even if you can't. She kissed him, cut off his spiral of words with lips that tasted like salt from tears and something sweeter he couldn't name. Her hands moved into his hair, careful of his head wound, and pulled him closer. Ji-hoon froze for half a heartbeat, then surrendered completely. His arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her slightly, angle deepening until they were pressed together and the cold soul night didn't exist anymore. Just her warmth, her certainty, her acceptance. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she was smiling through tears. You absolute fool, she whispered. Did you really think I needed a speech to know? I what? I love you too. She cupped his scarred cheek. I've loved you since that night in the cafe when you told me about Daejung. Maybe before. I don't know exactly when it happened. Just that one day I realized I'd walk through fire for you. You walked into a Mafia warehouse for me. Same thing. He laughed, a real, genuine sound that felt rusty from disuse. You're insane, says the man who went unarmed into a death trap. Fair point. They stood like that, wrapped around each other, while Seoul hummed far below. I don't know what this looks like, Ji-hoon admitted after a while. My life, my world, it's complicated. I'm not scared of complicated. You should be, but I'm not. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Look, I'm not naive. I know loving you means dealing with danger, with enemies, with a world most people never see. But here's the thing. I'd rather have a complicated, dangerous life with you than a safe, empty one without you. You mean that? I do. She brushed her thumb over his scar one more time. This isn't the end of your story, Ji-hoon. It's your beginning. And I want to be part of that beginning. Something in him broke open completely. He'd cried before alone, in darkness, where no one could see. But this was different. These tears came in Brianna's arms, under open sky, witnessed and accepted. She held him while he shook, held him while 7 years of walls crumbled, held him through the terror and the release and the impossible, fragile hope that maybe he really was allowed this. I've got you, she murmured, the same words she'd said when he fell asleep on her lap. I've got you, and I'm not letting go. When the storm passed, when he could breathe again, he lifted his head to find her still there, still looking at him with that steady acceptance. Your scar isn't your curse, she said softly. It's your survival. It's proof you're strong enough to endure betrayal and still believe in trust. Strong enough to be carved open and still allow someone to touch you gently. Brianna, it's not your end, Ji-hoon. It's your beginning. And I'm grateful for it, because without it, you might not have let me see the man underneath. He kissed her again, slower this time, deliberate and tender, pouring 7 years of loneliness into connection, 7 years of doubt into certainty. When they finally pulled apart, Seoul was still there, still glittering, still dangerous and beautiful and complicated. But for the first time in 7 years, Ji-hoon Jung looked at his city and felt like he belonged to something beyond survival. He belonged to her, and she belonged to him. Stay, he said. Tonight. Every night you're willing. I'm willing, she replied. For as many nights as you'll have me. That might be a very long time. She smiled, the same words he'd said to her days ago. Good. 6 months changed everything. Not the external things. Ji-hoon still controlled his territories, still held power, still moved through Seoul's underworld with the authority of someone who'd earned his position through blood and survival. But the internal landscape had shifted entirely. "Boss, the Gangnam faction is requesting a meeting," Taemin said, reviewing the schedule in Ji-hoon's office. "They want to discuss the port territories. Schedule it, but make it clear. Negotiations, not threats." Taemin raised an eyebrow. 6 months ago, Ji-hoon's approach would have been more direct, more violent. The old Ji-hoon would have just taken the territories. The old Ji-hoon was exhausting. Ji-hoon signed the last document, setting down his pen. "And inefficient. Turns out you can accomplish more through strategic negotiation than through constant warfare. Brianna's influence, I assume. Everything is Brianna's influence now." Taemin smiled. In 6 months, he'd watched his boss transform from the scarred king into something more dangerous. A man with something to lose, and the wisdom to protect it carefully. The organization had noticed the change too. Some of the old guard grumbled that Ji-hoon had gone soft. But the younger members, the ones tired of endless violence and constant paranoia, saw something different. They saw strength through strategy instead of fear. They saw a leader who valued loyalty over blind obedience. They saw a man who'd survived betrayal and chose mercy over vengeance, and somehow that made him more powerful, not less. "Anything else?" Ji-hoon asked, already thinking about the evening ahead. "Just one thing." Taemin pulled out a small box. "This arrived from the jeweler. He says it's exactly what you requested." Ji-hoon opened the box. Inside, a ring, elegant, simple, with a single stone that caught the light like captured fire. "It's perfect," he said quietly. "So tonight's the night? If she says yes, boss." Taemin's expression softened. She's going to say yes. Brianna arrived at the penthouse at 7, still in scrubs from her shift. "I would have changed," she said apologetically, kissing Ji-hoon hello. "But you said not to be late." "You're perfect as you are." She narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "You're being extra charming. What did you do? Why do you assume I did something?" "Because I know you." Fair point. In 6 months, she'd learned to read him better than anyone ever had, better than he could read himself sometimes. "Come with me," he said, offering his hand. He led her to the elevator, but instead of going down, they went up. To the rooftop where, 6 months ago, he'd finally admitted he loved her. The space had changed since then. No longer the barren, exposed platform he'd avoided for years. Now there were plants, Brianna's influence, and subtle lighting that made it feel less like a defensive position and more like a sanctuary. And tonight, there was more. Candles, dozens of them, creating pathways of light. A table set for 2, simple but elegant, and the view of Seoul spread out below them like a promise. "Ji-hoon," Brianna breathed. "What is this?" "Dinner, and a conversation." "Awfully formal for dinner." "It's an important conversation." They sat, and for a while, they just enjoyed the food, the view, each other's company. 6 months had taught them that silence together was as valuable as words. But eventually, Ji-hoon set down his fork. "Do you remember the first night you came here?" he asked. "When I stitched up Min-jae? Kind of hard to forget." "Do you remember what you said to me?" She thought back. "I said a lot of things. You said, 'Someone hurt you, but I'm not here to hurt you.'" His hand moved unconsciously to his scar. "That was the moment everything changed for me. Ji-hoon, for 7 years, I believed this." He gestured to the scar. "Defined me. That it was a permanent mark of betrayal. A curse that meant I was unlovable, unwanted, destined to be alone. And I'd made peace with that. Or I thought I had." He stood, moving to where she sat, and knelt beside her chair. Brianna's breath caught. "Then you touched it. Touched me. Like I was just a man instead of a monster. And you kept doing it. Kept seeing past the scar to who I was underneath. Kept believing I could be better than my worst moments." "Because you can," she said, her voice thick. "Because you are. You saved me," he said simply. "Not just at the warehouse. Every day. Every moment you choose to stay, despite the complications, despite the danger, despite everything my world throws at you. You saved me from the cold I'd learned to live in." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I don't have a lot of experience with this," he continued, pulling the small box from his pocket. "With love, with trust, with believing I'm allowed to have something good. But I know I want to spend the rest of my life learning. With you, if you'll have me." He opened the box. "Brianna Campbell, will you marry me?" For a heartbeat, she was silent. Then she was out of her chair, pulling him up, her hands framing his face, both palms covering the scar and the unmarked side equally. Yes, she said. Yes, yes, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly, then pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, breathing in her warmth and certainty. You're sure? He murmured. Because my life is my life now, she finished. We come as a package deal. Your scars and mine, your complications and mine, your future and mine. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped around each other, while Seoul glittered below and the candles flickered in the night breeze. The scar used to be all I saw in the mirror, Ji-hoon said eventually. Every time I looked at my reflection, that's what I focused on. The mark of betrayal. The proof I was cursed. And now I see the face you touch with love. The face you chose despite, or maybe because of everything it's been through. He pulled back to look at her. You changed what the scar means. Changed what I mean. Brianna's thumbs traced the line one more time. It's not a curse, Ji-hoon. It never was. It's just proof you survived. That you're strong enough to carry your history and still build a future. Build a future with you, he corrected. Yes. She smiled through tears. With me. They stood at the railing, looking out over the city. The same view from his glass penthouse windows below, but somehow different from up here. Less isolating, more possibility. I used to think power was all I'd ever have, Ji-hoon said quietly. That respect through fear was enough. That being alone was safer than risking connection. And now I know there's a different kind of power. The kind that comes from trusting someone completely. From being vulnerable and surviving it. From choosing love even when it's terrifying. You're not alone anymore, Brianna said. Neither of us is. No. He turned her to face him fully, his hands on her waist, hers linked behind his neck. We're not. The kiss was slow, deep, full of promise. 6 months of building trust. 6 months of learning each other's wounds and healing together. 6 months of proving that maybe, just maybe, two people who'd been broken in different ways could build something whole. When they finally broke apart, the candles had burned lower, but the city lights were as bright as ever. Come on, Brianna said, tugging him toward the rooftop door. Let's go inside. I want to call my mother and tell her I'm engaged to a Korean Mafia boss. She's going to lose her mind. Ji-hoon laughed, a real, full sound that came easier now. Will she approve? Eventually, after she's done lecturing me about sensible life choices, Brianna grinned. But she'll love you. Everyone who actually knows you, loves you. Not everyone. Everyone who matters. They rode the elevator down together, hand in hand. In the penthouse, Brianna immediately grabbed her phone while Ji-hoon watched her with an expression that was becoming familiar. Contentment. Peace. Home. Mom, hi. Yes, I know it's late. No, everything's fine. Actually, better than fine. I have news. Brianna glanced at Ji-hoon, her smile radiant. I'm engaged. The squeal from the phone was audible even across the room. Ji-hoon moved to the window, the same spot where, almost 7 months ago, he'd stood alone, convinced he'd never be allowed this. Never be worthy of love. Never escape the curse his scar represented. His reflection stared back at him now. The same jagged line across his face. But Brianna was right. It looked different now. Not a curse. Not a mark of shame. Just a scar. Just proof he'd survived. Just part of the story that led him to her. Behind him, Brianna laughed at something her mother said, the sound filling the penthouse with warmth it had never known. And Ji-hoon Jung, the scarred king of Seoul's underworld, the man everyone feared and no one wanted, realized something profound. Love wasn't something he'd been denied. It was something he'd chosen. Something he'd fought for. Something he'd earned through surviving his worst moments and still believing he could be better. The scar would always be there. The scars they both carried, his visible, hers hidden, would always be part of their stories. But they didn't define the future. Not anymore. The city lights reflected across his face, illuminating the scar and the unmarked side equally. And for the first time in 7 years, Ji-hoon looked at his reflection and smiled. Not because the scar was gone, but because he'd finally learned to see past it. To the man Brianna had always seen. To the man he was still becoming. To the future they would build together, complicated, dangerous, beautiful, and absolutely, unquestionably worth fighting for. If this story touched your heart, hit subscribe, because love stories like Ji-hoon and Brianna's remind us that healing is possible, that scars don't define us, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let someone see us. Drop a comment telling me, what was your favorite moment? And click the next video on your screen, because every ending is just another beginning. Thank you for being here. Let's keep telling stories that matter.